welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sheri Pallas. So we're doing something new this week. This is actually not live. It's Saturday. I just recorded an interview with Karl and Laura forehand. And so tonight I'm going to share that with you. I won't be answering questions live, but I will be monitoring the Facebook and YouTube feed for comments or questions. So keep those coming. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week. I really hope you enjoy this interview. I had so much fun chatting with them and talking to them about my path and how I got here to being your host of Fireside Creators. So enjoy the show, and I will see you guys next week for our live show again. Don't forget, walk in love. Mwah! See you next week. Pretend it's live.
Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. We are grateful to be with you today. It is Saturday afternoon, and we have just been enjoying a lovely day. We're really excited to have Reverend Dr. Sheri Pallas on the podcast today. She is an author, ally, and activist. She hosts a weekly live stream, Fireside Creators, with expert and the experienced, tackling tough topics. Sheri was raised between two extremes of judgment and hate. Her father, a drug-dealing ex-con, once nominated to be a grand dragon in the KKK. Her mom was a speaking in tongues, book-burning evangelical. He terrorized her, and her mom demonized her. For years, she lived under the shame and delusion of her cult-like indoctrination. Until at 27, she learned the universe isn't 6,000 years old, and Adam and Eve weren't really the first humans, triggering a tsunami of distrust in everything she knew. The dismantling of her religion began. Now Sheri, sorry, I lost it. I'm so sorry. Now Sheri has her PhD in comparative religion, and her soon-to-be published book is We Have Ruined God, My Journey Out of Religion and Into the Arms of Love. Sheri's passion is restoring unconditional love to the message about God. Welcome to the podcast, Sheri. That is an incredible bio.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sums it up. I guess we're done now, right?
Yeah,
No.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
We were talking before we went on that you guys had an interview before.
Yeah, I've been on Fireside Creators.
Yeah.
That was a blast. I really enjoyed doing that.
And
it was so
my
awesome.
summation, you guys did fine. You don't need me. I'll just sit here. I'll just be window dressing. I'll be the arm candy or whatever. I can't even say that without laughing. So, welcome. We're glad you're here. We see you on, there's a lot of people that we see online, and interact and share on each other's walls and things like that. But there's something pretty cool about a podcast. There's something kind of deep about a podcast. You have to, first of all, listen.
Mm-hmm.
Laura and I would do podcasts together, and we'd kind of interview each other. And we noticed that, maybe in real life, we don't even do that all the time. We don't sit down and just listen to somebody.
Right.
And so this is a treat for us. It's almost like therapy sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sit down and tell our stories to each other. Something maybe we've lost in culture and so on. But can we begin, Sheri, just by you telling us your story in whatever detail you want to tell it, and we'll kind of go from there.
I guess I can say that I am probably one of the original deconstructionists, meaning that I started about 25 years ago. Back then, without social media, without support, running from the church and their judgment, I was out in the desert, right? And trying to figure out where I was wrong, where things were right, where there was some type of truth in my faith is what led me to that journey. I knew that there was something extraordinary out there, but I had a really hard time believing it was the God of religion. I had the God of religion had been portrayed to me as someone that is technically bipolar, would possess some type of clinical definition now for a mental illness. And the unconditional love came with so many conditions.
Yeah.
So when my grandson was treated the same way that I had contacted my son's church when he had his son, because his mother wanted to do a dedication. She actually asked for a christening, but because I was an evangelical, we did dedications. So I contacted the church and said, hey, when's your next dedication ceremony? I'd like to get my grandson in it. Both of his parents are in the Navy. They don't have a home church. What can you do? And to make a long story short, she said no, because the baby's parents were not married and the child was conceived in sin.
Wow.
So that completely triggered me. I was aghast. I could not even believe that a simple prayer for a child would come under such scrutiny. So that night I wrote my first ever complaint letter, and I sent it to her and said, this is crap. Basically, it was far more eloquent than that. It is included in the book. But basically, this is crap. Jesus didn't have any qualifiers when he said, bring the children to me. How dare you do this? And because of that outrage, and because of that bigotry and judgment and everything that was now being put on my grandson, that was it. I had to set this record straight. My intention was to show where all of the church was wrong and where I thought they were wrong. And instead it sent me on this, it's been a dozen years now, of really getting down to the cores of all the faiths and figuring out where the truth lies, where the agendas are, where the corruption is, and try and find some type of foundation there. And I believe I have, and that foundation is love.
That's good.
When you did your research on the different religions, did you find like some commonalities as far as when you talk, because when you were speaking about the situation with your grandson, I mean, I think from an evangelical perspective, we can relate to that. But did you see that kind of across the board religion wise, or is that something that's just special to evangelicals?
No, it's not actually.
Okay.
All the religions get a lot wrong, and they all get some right. If you were to take all of the faiths, the major faiths, there's like 4,200 or something right now. But if you take the premise of all of the major faiths and did a Venn diagram, love and let go would be in the center. Everything else around those is the dogma that is preached in those religions. So if you get down to the cores of them, it's surrender. Of course, in evangelical, it's surrender as opposed to, the Eastern religions is surrender. So when you look at that, a lot of humanists are now saying, get into the flow, let the universe align. There's all different ways of saying it. Let go, let God, thy will be done, O Lord. All of those types of things get you into that type of alignment with God. The love is paramount in all of them. And in fact, I propose that that's how it all started, was trying to come up with some type of name for that creative, miraculous thing called love. And then as corrupt humans and egomaniacs that we are, we started piling on all of these laws and all of these other things when it's really totally simple, albeit very difficult, to love your neighbor.
Right.
So talk about what I see. What are the things wrong that you see between religions? I would suggest fear and control.
Totally.
That fear and control is almost always present. We think it's a good thing. We think it's responsible. but it never has good results, right?
No, fear
What
always
else?
screws things up.
Yeah. What else did you find? The commonalities that are toxic, the trauma producing things.
Well, the number one thing is the ego says that that belief is the only true and correct one. And in order to get to the truth, or what I could find as far as the truth, because it's all based on beliefs, is that whenever the agendas start taking over, whenever the personal gains start taking over, whenever government gets involved. Now, government is the reason why we have the top religions at this point, because at some point, in the Bible, it's Constantine. For Christianity, Buddha had his, all of the faiths have been tied to some type of government at some point in time that gave them the validity. But they all think that they're right. And in looking at the truth, the only thing that can be true is love, because we need to be taught about God. But as a child will die without love. It can be fed, it can be clothed, it can be housed, but severe illness, mental illness, physical illnesses arrive if a child is not loved. From the moment we're born to the day we die, we look for love. So that is the one truth across all of the religions, is love. Because again, we need to be taught about God. We need to be taught about these things. Love producing empathy, you start to feel your neighbor's pain. So it prevents you from doing all of the wrongs that religion says for you not to do. We just look for exceptions. I have this vision of Moses sitting there and the tribes coming up going, but what about this guy? Do I have to love him? And Moses going, okay, no, you really don't. And they go on and on and on looking for all the exceptions. It's not easy, but I think that that's what's right.
Right.
So what I hear you talking about, what came to my mind when I'm listening to you talk was connection, and I love Brene Brown, and she talks about how we're hardwired for connection. And so do you see connection and love as synonymous? That's my first question. And secondly, do you feel like religion is the only place that we can find true love, connection?
Yeah.
I think love and connection are synonymous. I think that I no longer believe in a hell or a Satan.
Right.
I believe that what people have been calling Satan is actually our egos, and ego would be the opposite of love. Ego separates, love unites. And no, I think religion has totally corrupted the message of love. I think that when you put conditions on unconditional love, then that totally screws everything up and makes it a hypocritical cults like click and join us. I mean, I always think of Mean Girls, the movie, that a lot of the proselytization and missionary work is like, join us or else you're going to burn in hell forever. That's not love. And it gives us nothing to aspire to, right? I mean, if God is some judgmental asshole who just flips and swings and wants their own, special children, I avoid those people on earth. I don't believe that being is worthy of praise, when that would be someone who I would avoid and not try to emulate.
Right.
I try to make, how could I be a better person? And at least in my experience, religion didn't teach me that.
Brene Brown also talked about common enemy intimacy. Like Laura said, the biggest thing we hear from people in response to our book and so on is, we need community. But a lot of times what we've called community is really faux community. Or Brene Brown says it's camouflage connection, right? It's a faux community, and not real intimacy. But
that's a relationship based on gossip and judgment, though, right?
We all hate the same people,
right?
Or we hate the devil, or we hate, and when you're talking about we're right, we think we're right, I had a sister, a Benedictine sister, that I learned spiritual direction from, and she walked to the marker board one day and wrote. She just kind of turned around and wrote it. She said, "None of us is right." And then she turned around and just looked at us and stood there for several minutes. And it's just one of the things, I'll always remember,
Right.
that none of us is right. And if we would start there, because like you're saying, we get to a point where we think we're right. At this point in history and in our situation, we think we got it figured out, and we draw a line around it. We call that a creed or a belief system. And when we do that, then we can justify almost anything. If we're right and God is on our side, then we can go to war. We can do whatever we want, and all throughout time, that's what's happened, right?
Yeah,
what
totally.
It's what we're looking for. I mean, not just simple in that it's just a couple of words, but is it simple? Is it simplistic in practice? You know what I'm saying? We're noticing, Laura and I are noticing about religion that we don't really need it. And the practices that are replacing it are very, very deep, meaningful, and all of that, but they're very simple. And connection turns out to be just listening to each other. It turns out to be real simple things that don't need a $10 million building and a $1 million budget, right? And they don't need thousands of people. It's me and a friend having intimate moments. It's me, like Laura says a lot, maybe doing nothing, right? Sitting alone.
Yeah, maybe it's tuning into your inner self, really. I mean, that could be part of that as well. Yeah.
We found.
I say it as truly seeing the person in front of me, as opposed to me putting on my expectations onto them of what I expect to be who they are. That is some type of honor when you see the person in front of you for who that they want you to see, for who that they are, as opposed to any types of judgments or anything like that. To me, that's love. And that encompasses the listening, that encompasses all of that, because if you're not seeing the person in front of you, you can't hear them either.
That's
so,
true.
I think the building should be destroyed. And I think, unless they are converted to homeless shelters or something to that effect, I think that they're completely worthless and only further the doctrine of a clique and these special children. It's like a family, say a family of 5, right? There's 2 parents and a kid, and the 3 kids are always saying, "Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite?" That's religion.
Yeah.
And the parents are like, "We love you all." And that's what God is to me. It's like, you guys just, if it was the ultimate parent, just stop fighting, just get along, love each other,
Right.
Stop worrying about an afterlife, create the heaven here through love.
So I know someone has said this to you before, so I'm just going to throw it out there to you. Say, but Sheri, our church is different. I'm sorry that's your experience. But our church is different. And so how do you respond to that?
Fantastic. I mean, I actually had someone say to me before, but I like church. It makes me feel good. And I said, that's great. But what is it doing for you the rest of the week? Is it making you a better person? I always bring up something that I struggle with is road rage, right? So I always use that as an example of when I need to be loving and when it's really, really difficult. I've grown from hitting the wheel and screaming every curse word in the book to dude. So I've grown. But those are the times that I think of, This is when love is needed, and this is when it's really hard. And
Mhm.
that's what makes it holy. That's what makes it something to aspire to. So if someone's church is different, then fantastic. If they are learning how to be more loving in that church, then it's fulfilling its role. If
Mhm.
it's not, which is the majority of churches now that are divisive, judgmental, the us versus them, and not teaching people how to get out of their comfort zone and love their neighbor, then it's completely worthless in a cult, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob Bell tells his story, not necessarily a Rob Bell disciple or anything. I like some of the stuff he says, but he has this illustration of a fish standing next to the ocean, and I don't know how he's standing, on his tail or something, right? But he takes about an hour to tell this story, like Rob Bell does. But he talks about the fish looking out at the ocean and seeing it differently, because he's not as close. When you're too close to the water, you can't see the water. You're too close to it. When you step back, then you see the waves and you see a bigger picture. You got perspective. Would you advocate, if someone was listening to this and they were inside of religion, would you suggest to them take a step back, and why should we? Is that a good idea?
Well, I think introspection is always key. I think if we don't check ourselves, we don't grow. And if we're not ashamed of some things in our past, we haven't grown at all. But in looking at, your religion, again, it's just a basic question. It goes back to the simplicity that you were talking about. It's not hard. It's not complicated, albeit it is hard. If it's not making you a better person, if it's not helping you grow in your amazement and your awe of this universe and your praise of everything that's on this planet, then what is it doing for you? I mean, if the goldfish is sitting on the beach looking at the ocean, it's got to be looking at, what is this going to do for me if I take that plunge? What is it currently doing for that fish standing on the shore? It's going to die.
Mhm.
I don't take that plunge and see what the bigger picture is out there, then they're not going anywhere. My ex-husband said right before he died, "How do you know all of this stuff?" As we were discussing the doctrine and everything like that. And I said, "I've read more than one book." And he was just dumbfounded by that. Hardcore evangelical, married 3 times, typical. But
Mhm.
he never even thought to look anywhere outside of the Bible. And frankly, until I, started realizing all of the inconsistencies within the Bible, neither had I. I mean, I was told it was the only source for everything we needed. And I regurgitated that for years.
Right.
So I didn't know I should look elsewhere until I was forced to confront the beliefs that I was told. I mean, I was raised in a Christian school, in a church. I was fully indoctrinated. My history book was the Bible. My science book was the Bible. So to find out that even one part of that was absolutely false rocked my world. Absolutely rocked my world. But it also got me here. And now I'm far more loving. I'm more accepting. I'm friendlier than I ever was as an evangelical.
That's what I tell Karl. That's the one thing I've noticed about me too, is that I feel freer to love in the way I feel like I was created to love, rather than being fearful to love someone that, was outside of whatever, the evangelical church said was the wrong person to love, if you know what I mean. Like, I feel like I can, there's just so many people that I feel I've missed out, really having enriched my life. And now I'm grateful that I'm able to take that step forward in love and really truly see them without judgment. And like you said, I love what you said about, honoring who they are. Like, simple, honor who
That's
they
love.
are. Yeah. I really that. And honoring their stories, because I believe that everybody's story is sacred. And while I'm very protective of my story, I am very protective of social media and what I put on there. But the stories that we've been able to hear since, moving outside of the churches have just really resonated and really touched. And I hold those extremely sacred. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing to look at people with honor rather than judgment or fear. I feel like a lot of my evangelical years were spent just being so afraid.
Totally.
And not only afraid of me, but like afraid of my children. And, if they made the wrong, which, in the evangelical world, they did make the wrong decisions, but they are the most beautiful people that I know, that love unconditionally. I mean, they're literally the three that have taught me how to love and honor and see people for truly who they are. So I'm really grateful for that. I wanted to ask you, because I was so intrigued by this part of your bio where your father was a drug dealing ex-con, part of the KKK, and your mom was this staunch, Bible believing evangelical. How did that, how do you,
We divorced when I was 2.
Okay. Because I was like, how do those two?
They hated each other. Absolutely
Okay.
hated each other. In fact, there's a picture of my wedding where my father walks in and my mom goes, ah.
Okay, because I was like, wow, that would be really hard to live in the same.
Went in completely different directions. Yes.
Okay. Got it.
He was married a total of 6 times. She was engaged just as many, but only had 2 marriages. So it was a revolving door on both sides also. Yeah. And let me just throw in there that I married a Black man and had a biracial child, which my father wanted to kill when my ex-husband and I split up. So because he was proof of my indiscretion. And my mom started disowning me at 14 because I was living in sin. And she was told that my walk would affect hers, and her walk with Jesus was more important than her being my mom. And so I was not allowed in her life. In fact, from 14 until 32 of my life went, and she died at 32. She was gone far more than she was ever alive.
But isn't that part of the messaging really, is that, I just remember hearing that too, that Jesus, that whole joy acronym or something like Jesus, others, and then you're supposed to forsake everything except for your relationship with Jesus. And that was always hard for me to reconcile, because I just thought, but I'm here with my husband and my kids, and they're here right now, but I'm supposed to be anyway. That was always
all it did for me was make me hate her God. It was like any God that's going to tell you to disown your daughter is not something I want any part of.
Right.
She was trying to get me to say, in fact, right before she died, she admitted it was part of control. She was trying to get me to follow her way of life. And she also said it didn't work. I was far too stubborn and too strong to ever let that happen. Although I did get married because I was forced to. So, but it just made me walk away and say, I don't want anything to do with your God if your God is making me do this, which also is propelled my journey though, too, because it was like, I know there's something else out there. I just know that they got it wrong. I know that there is something extraordinary. I've seen the sunsets. I've seen our solar system. I've seen all of those things. So to say that we are the superior species and all that there is, and that we are special in God's eyes compared to everything else, it just didn't make any sense to me at all.
Mhm.
Right.
So no pastor probably starts ministry and says, I want to cause trauma in people's lives.
Yeah. No parent does it either.
Yeah, and no church starts that way either. But organizations called, religious organizations, I would say one reason is because it's an organization. It has to preserve the organization, and that comes first before the individual. But it's becoming more and more apparent that churches promise to help with trauma and to help the hurting. But it's becoming more and more apparent that not only are they not helping, but they're also causing trauma, right? So in your mind, can we get a little more specific and say what specifically are they doing that causes the trauma, or that doesn't heal it, in your opinion? I mean,
well, when you go into a business model as opposed to an instructional model, I think that's the first failure. When they lost sight of trying to teach people how to be more loving and love their neighbor, and started focusing on, I'm right, this is the only path, you have to be a part of our club, that's when people get hurt. There's not, and by the way, let me clarify, my dad never joined the KKK because it was an organization. He was nominated, but he was completely against organization. So it wasn't that it was a hateful, murderous, or it was just that it was an organization.
Gotcha.
And he said that organizations were crutches as a drug dealer. But logic, goes away from there. But again, if you're not teaching people how to be more loving, then it is a business model, then it is a clique, and it's not necessary unless you're looking for something to do Sunday mornings. It's going to cause trauma when you say us versus them. It's going to cause trauma when you say, because of who you are and who you were born to be, God hates you, and we're the only one that's right. My book is actually dedicated to a high school friend's son whose family was an evangelical, and he killed himself. He jumped off a bridge because he was told that God hated him for being gay. And when that type of message is being put out there, he was actually at a picnic that day, a family picnic of all the evangelicals, and someone laughed at him and said, "You're going to hell." And that poor child jumped off a bridge that night because of those beliefs. That is not loving, that is toxic, and that will always cause trauma. No matter, any way you look at it, if it's outside of a church or inside of a church, if you're giving that message of that you're supposed to hate who you are, trauma is going to ensue from there. Love. And that's one thing I'd like to say also, I've been doing Fireside Creators for a year and a half now. And I've had shows from racism to transgender and everything in between. And one thing that has become overwhelmingly clear is that no matter who you are on this planet, you want to be loved and accepted for who you are. The difference is whether or not society allows you to be that person.
Right.
So a lot of the times religion is put into that societal figure to say that, no, you're not okay. So when you have that type of negativity and shaming people, it used to be because they were of color. Now our current day is the LGBTQ community. But when you say those types of things and project those types of things, people die, they don't want to be a part of it, and there's no growth or love or anything. Literally, everybody has the same story. Just please, just love and accept me. For straight, cis, white people, no offense, it's a lot easier than it is for someone who is a person of color or in the LGBT. So the church is the ones that should be racing to those people and saying, you are loved.
Right. Right.
But just especially what we saw in 2000, during the pandemic, we missed it. We didn't take that opportunity.
Yeah.
So we wanted to know a little bit more about your book. So you have a book that's coming out pretty soon.
Hopefully. I'm in the editing stages right now. So I'm racing against the clock and trying to get it out before the end of the year. It's been a really long process.
Yeah.
So tell us a little more about why you wrote it, what it's about.
Well, the precipice was my grandson. That complaint letter spawned this book, and really trying to, basically I wrote down my deconstruction and what, I wanted to find out the questions. And a big part of the book is sin, because what exactly is a sin and how those have varied across the millennia. I mean, potatoes used to be a sin. Over 200,000 people were killed because they thought that potatoes were a sin. So I addressed the ridiculous natures and the things that have literally killed people in dogma across the religions to come to the point of the Venn diagram of love and let go. I address the beliefs about heaven and hell, the lack of beliefs about science, the LGBTQ community, as well as animals, because a lot of people believe that animals are below us. And I point out that that's also very wrong and ego-driven. So it's my journey through and answering the questions that I had, and that I know that a lot of other people have too. Where is the truth? Was, or was it just a con this entire time? Spoiler, it wasn't a con.
Do you have a title for it?
Yes, it's We Have Ruined God, my journey out of religion and into the arms of love.
Yes, thank you. I said that at the beginning, but thank you for saying that again. That's awesome.
Yeah, so as the church says, love is my religion, peace is my intention now.
Very nice.
So we've been asking this question to a lot of different people, a lot of varied backgrounds. The question is, can you deconstruct too far? The reason I ask it is because some of the people that are even giving advice in the deconstruction movement that are maybe a little more famous, that might have a vested interest in staying in religion, say, don't deconstruct too far, you won't have anything left. I'd like to know your opinion about that. Can you deconstruct too far? They say you'll lose your faith. I think they mean you lose your religion. But they also talk about nihilism and, nothingness and all that kind of stuff. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that just like shampoo, there is no one fit for everybody. We've totally accepted our differences, that each shampoo works for different people, but in religion, we, say that you have to have one. My personal experiences since I was a child is that atheists have shown me more love than the religious community. So I don't believe that religion is necessary. In fact, I think that it's detrimental in a lot of places. I think that for me, my faith relies in, my faith lies in love and the creative aspect of love. Now, I think that I only have my level of faith because I've also been practicing patience. I've noticed that a lot of people who are still in the very angry stages of deconstruction is because they stopped and decided that they were just going to be angry. I think true healing in a deconstructive process will bring you back to love. albeit that doesn't mean that you will see love as a synonym for God. I still see love as a synonym for God, although I do not believe in the God of religion anymore. I do not believe there is some guy in the sky sitting there with another guy. I don't believe that God is a being or matter in any way, shape, or form, because that breaks all of God's laws. But I do believe in the very powerful, miraculous energy of love. So whatever works for that, for each person to be more loving and better towards their neighbor, is, I think that's what matters. One of the biggest things that helped me in my deconstruction was this book, because I started it saying, I don't know. I need, and going from, I know everything because of my faith in God and the Bible, to holy crap, I know nothing, really helps me. A lot of people can't say that, but I have no problem to say, I don't know. I have gone through all of the mental gymnastics to say, okay, what if I'm wrong? What if there is a being in the sky? What if it's aliens? What if the nihilism, there's nothing? And I'm totally okay with that now, because I'm going to always err on the side of love. So I'm okay with that at that point. There's no beliefs that change anything. It's like, you know what, if I'm going to screw up huge, I'd rather screw up and be the most loving person I can. I know that will create change, not being an asshole.
Right.
I want to do something out of the ordinary here, and just because I think you'll handle it pretty well. And just kind of a lightning round. I just want to say, what I don't know if you know a lady named Elena Lewandowski. She's a singer, kind of a mystic, and we had her on our program a couple of times. And the last time she spoke to us, she spent like 30 or 40 minutes on 2 words.
Oh, wow.
And I noticed, kind of in our journey, that words kind of emerge as important, like love, right? So love is real important. But there's some other ones that I want to mention the word and see, just comment.
Okay.
You can say, I don't have any comment if you want to.
Get back to this therapy session here.
This one, when you and Laura were talking a minute ago, this word kept coming up, and I was going to say something, but I didn't need to. So, but compassion is, how important is compassion?
I think compassion enables you to see your neighbor. Compassion and empathy, I think, are the right and the left arm of love. In order to see someone, you have to be compassionate, because you have to hear and see their story. Without compassion, you're not going to be able to truly honor someone, because you're not going to believe them. We see that with the Me Too movement all over the place.
What about the word presence?
Oh, I struggle with presence. I'm always in my head. I wake up with a song in my head most of the day, so my mind is always going. Presence is a goal for me. I know that it's one of the most important things, and is a key to mental health. But wow, it's a tough one for me. I want to know when, why. I am such a control freak that being present is a real challenge. Presence and patience are things that I struggle with.
About authenticity.
Authenticity is a key to freedom. Again, the world will tell you that you suck, and that everything about you is not the way it should be. But being authentic and really coming into who I am and accepting that has been so hard, and being vulnerable about it, but it's also so empowering. And once you get into it, I think it's easier, because there's no more pretending. There's no more trying to fake it. There's no more, oh my God, I spent so much of my life, I was so bad at wanting people to like me that when I would pull up to a stoplight, I would assess the crowd around me and then adjust my music accordingly. That is how obsessed I was with what people thought of me.
Right.
Now that I'm that I try to be authentic in who I am, it's more using the same story. It's more of a watch me dance, listen to, what am I doing? It's so much more freeing, and it gives me the capacity, instead of having the energy of pretending to be someone else, I use that energy to try and be the best I can and push that towards love.
Yeah.
I also feel like that once you are more authentic, or at least this has been my experience, then letting other people be their authentic self is a lot easier,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and because you also know how hard it is to be authentic, right?
Right. Exactly.
So the last three you might hear in yogi circles and so on. Let's see, Sat, Chit, Ananda. Those are the three words. But the first one is being or existence. That's the title of my third book. It's called Being. How about that? Being or existence? What does that say to you?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, do you mean honoring our being as a human? I kind of like what I know Wayne Dyer didn't originally say it, but I like the that we are spiritual beings having a human experience as opposed to human beings having a spiritual experience. That's the way I look at our beings at this point. I look at our lives as an evolving lesson of what our paths are supposed to take in this world. And again, part of the creativeness of love. Does that answer your question, or am I way off?
Yeah, I think
that's
okay.
Great.
Yeah, I sometimes say we're human beings, not human doings.
Exactly.
And that existence, when God said, who do was it Moses or Abraham? Who do you want me to tell him that you are? And he said, I am, and I exist. Right. And then Jesus said, before Abraham was, I exist. I am ego of me. So that's what I think of when I think of being or existence. I exist, and that sounds like a cop out, but that's really enough. That's it.
Well, I mean, but haven't they been saying that? They've been trying to ponder that since Plato. I think, therefore I am, and I mean, I don't think Plato said that, but back, all of that, we've been trying to figure that out. That's an existential question that I'm still pondering. But being, again, I think that being equals the presence. We forget that we are beings, as opposed, again, it's the doing. An evangelical, I mean, oh my God, you always have to be doing as an evangelical,
right?
The exceptionalism and all of that. Just being is completely antithetical to evangelicalism. So that's something that I really struggle with too. It's like, to rest. Are you kidding me? I can't do that. I was raised an evangelical.
Right.
So the second part is consciousness, existence, consciousness, and then there's one more. Talk about consciousness a bit.
So, there is a philosopher, Dr. Fagan. He is really good friends with, anyway, he has a conscious research study, which I quote in the book also. And he's actually the founder of the semiconductor. He helped build this, and now he's working in consciousness, because after, 30 years now, we still can't make computers conscious. I was shocked to find out that Buddhism doesn't believe in an individual consciousness, but a universal consciousness, which really messed with my whole ego and not the afterlife and all of those things. But I think our consciousness is our soul. And I think that that is the energy that continues after our body passes. That is what truly comes alive once our body is no longer there. I call it our skin bags. Once we drop our skin bags, then we are completely the consciousness. That is where the love resides. That is where our soul resides. And that is what we are tapping into when we are looking for our purpose in this life.
So the last thing is bliss. Anna does bliss. You hear people talk about bliss. What does it mean to you?
Bliss is a synonym for peace. And I think that that's just contentment, again, being present. I think they all tie into each other. You can't be content if you're not present. You can't be present if you don't have patience. And you can't have any of those if you think you know it all, right? Because there's so many things coming at all of these different ways. And I mean, my life today is nowhere near where I thought it would be 5 years ago when I set out on these journeys. I had plans, I had spreadsheets, I had everything. And nowhere in the equation is where I would be right now. And if I didn't have the compassion for myself, the grace for everyone around me, the presence, don't get me wrong, I have spent far too many times on the bathroom floor at a ball crying, going, oh my God, I screwed up my entire life. But it goes back to okay, just be patient with the process. You're learning all of these things. And without all of those things put together, I think that's all the wholeness of us. All of these factors in it makes the picture of love and being the people that we are supposed to be, which doesn't include the wars, which doesn't include shooting your neighbor or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So sorry for putting you on the spot, but I have one more question.
Okay.
I ask this to most people too. So anyway, it's, what would you put on your billboard? If your billboard, we're always doing social media stuff and hoping people will see it and people will like it. But if you had a certain amount of space that could communicate to everybody, what's the message you want to tell everybody?
Love is hard, do it anyway.
Okay, good.
That's good.
Yeah. We should put that at least on a meme, right?
Right? Somewhere.
Or a t-shirt or something.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. So
like that.
Before we go, do you got any questions you want to ask us while we're
I
here
have
on
just
the spot?
so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm sorry if I talked too much and got on my soapbox, but you guys are absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for having me a part of your desert sanctuary.
Yes, thank you so much. We've loved having you on. How can people find you? So
okay, so it's Sheri Pallas, and they're both spelled completely wrong to what you would think it would be, but it's Sheri, and Pallas is just like Dallas except with a P. My mom came up with that years ago, but SheriPallas.com, and that has everything. My website's up to date. You can find Fireside Creators and the show that Laura was on, and everything about me and contact information and all of that. And if you sign up, you get a bracelet, a wristband that says, love is my religion, peace is my intention, and stay in touch.
Nice.
There you go.
Nice.
You can put that on the billboard also.
Yeah.
Well, I have it on the shirt. I've got it on my wristband. I didn't want to fall back on that, so I came up with something else.
So ours is the Desert Sanctuary says, be where you are and be who you are. It's going back to present and authenticity. Yeah. So I always say, ladies and gentlemen, Sheri Pallas. Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. It was easy for us. It was a little harder for you.
It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. It's weird being on this side. I mean, I've done a bunch of podcasts, but since my show, it's like weird being on this side, but I loved it. I loved being on this side of the chair this time.
Great. Thanks for being
Awesome.
here.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.